Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back with a delightful guest, Stephen. We talked about self-doubt, and I would really invite you to go back and listen to that. And today, what we're going to do a deep dive around is related to how can I become less defensive and more vulnerable? And it ties in a little bit from what we talked about in terms of self-doubt in some ways, but it's really a deep dive into this issue around being less defensive and more vulnerable. So, Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Dr. Judith, and hi, audience. I'm Stephen Schettini. I was trained as a Buddhist monk in the Tibetan tradition. I was a monk for 8 years. I was trained to be a teacher, so I was taught in a very formal, scholastic way. Since I left the tradition, and I've been working on my own for over 40 years now, I've endeavored to translate that into everyday language, into ordinary terminology, into the realities that we actually live. I'm trying to make all this accessible, and my passion, my love is to teach mindfulness and to help people become more mindful.
I think the more that we can allow or help people to see how is it applicable to my day-to-day life. That's what Mastering Life's Adventures is all about. It's like, how do I apply this stuff on the different things that happen in my world, the experiences that I've had? What do I do with it? Not realizing it is tied into something greater than ourselves, these experiences that we're happening to us. And I'm talking it from the lens of the soul and the soul's evolution, the soul's growth that we're trying to learn living on planet Earth. So today we're talking about how can I become less defensive and more vulnerable? Thoughts, Stephen?
The first thing is to see how we're defensive. By looking into it, when I say how we're defensive, I don't mean in terms of analysis and looking back on our past and why, although that's important too, but seeing it as it happens. When I'm defensive, can I see it? Can I know in that moment, oh, I'm being defensive? Because that is all about getting your hands on the mechanism of what's going on. This is all learned behavior. Self-doubt is learned behavior. Being vulnerable is natural. We're born vulnerable. We're born completely helpless. It's quite amazing, actually. Humans, we're the weakest newborns of all. But the first thing we do is we go into survival mode. We hang on to our mother. We look for the breast. We hang on to stability. We avoid impermanence as much as we can. We try and avoid change. We want things to be stable. We take out insurance policies. We're trying to fix life down. And this is a problem because giving in continually to the survival mechanism and to the idea that I have to be defensive encourages this way of behaving where we're trying to defend not just our body and our mind, but our ego. And that's when things get messy and messed up. It requires self-observation. That's the starting point. And when you can see the way in which your survival mechanism is making you defensive and you can start to let go, then the natural result is that vulnerability simply floats back to the surface. And you can be you. You can be real. And you can take those risks. And sometimes you fall flat on your face, but you have the courage to learn from it and grow. Because there's no growth without falling flat on your face.
Mm-hmm. And it struck me when you were saying that, I think sometimes we're not quite sure how to be real. I think we've had layers and layers of experiences, bad, good, or indifferent, that has made us further and further away from who we really are and understanding the soul essence of who you really are. And you should say the soul is a substance of your life. It's a substance of who you really are. But we think the porridge or the candy or the 10-course meal is who we really are. We love the meal and we love being involved at work with messy types of things when we're having conflicts. And we love conflicts. We usually win in those conflicts. We love all these different things. And actually, they're not the substance of who we are. They're experiences that we go through. They're aspects in which we're supposed to learn, but sometimes we do not. Our experiences either set us up for being defensive, or it sets us up to understand what humility really is and how do we want to show up in that way. But we tend to want to protect ourselves, which is a natural instinct of survival, but it also walls us off to understanding a greater sense of who we truly are.
When we get into conflict with people and we get caught up in it, we become defensive. When we learn to step back and look at the other person and see the way in which they're being defensive, suddenly everything changes. So it's almost like magic. It's, oh, that's why he's like that. I thought it was because of me. So that personal defensiveness drops. Well, then we can just be whatever we want. We don't have to be something. But trying to be something is another version of, I'm going to deal with this person and I have to be stronger. I have to be better. I have to be louder, whatever it is. We're trying to be something, which is not about being vulnerable. It's about, how can I put it? The ego is constantly trying to build us, and it builds us over. It's a layer on top of our vulnerability. We're trying to hide it. We don't want to be vulnerable. I might get hurt. I'm going to put on a show. When we see what we're doing with the show, when we see that it doesn't really work very well for us, and we can let it go, then again, the vulnerability comes out. It's a matter of dealing with fear. It's recognizing that fear of being vulnerable, that instinct to cover it up, to say, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. It's your fault. When we can let go of that, then we become authentic. Letting go of it is not a one-shot deal. I can see that I'm being defensive and I can stop it. But in the next moment, you might say something else which makes me defensive again. So I have to be continually on guard for that. And that sounds like a lot of work, but it's not that it's hard work, but it requires dedication for sure. We have to be committed to growth. We say, oh, I'm 18 now, I don't need to grow up. I'm 21 now, okay, I got my degree, I'm finished with school, I finished growing. There's no finishing, but there's two ways of growing. Either you grow consciously, in which case you can change wisely and intelligently, or you grow up. That doesn't usually work out very well because we're guided by survival instincts, which are very defensive, which shut down communication. I got completely stuck in myself for a long time, just before becoming a monk. I was trapped in my own mind. I was afraid of everybody in the world, but I didn't know I was afraid. I thought everyone else in the world was a problem, and they were causing my problems. So I wanted to get away from them. It took me a long time to realize that, no, I'm just plain afraid of people. And that, to admit that, that's vulnerability. Because I don't want to be fearful. I'm a tough guy. I'm not afraid. It's their fault, not mine. So again, identifying, seeing when the ego is popping its head up and saying, that's ego. But then there are other times when we need to be defensive. We need to protect ourselves. So if we can see that, no, that's real. So again, what we need is this discerning mind. We can see that's just automatic defensiveness bringing me down. That's wise, intelligent thoughtfulness. It takes attention, constant attention. not in the sense that it's exhausting and you have to be on your toes all the time, but just in the sense that it becomes natural for you to say, oh, why am I behaving like this? How is this working out for me? And just taking a moment to take a breath and go inside and be quiet and see. That is where vulnerability lies. But you can't do it at any time. You go into a job interview, you don't want to be too vulnerable. You want to promote yourself, but you want to be real, because if you're too fake, they'll see through it. So there's the balance again. It takes attention, lots of attention.
I'm wondering if there's different degrees or different aspects of vulnerability. There's the vulnerability which one has is lodged in fear. You're going to hurt me in some ways.
Yeah.
And then there is the vulnerability that is more of awareness that this situation is allowing me to be open to something more. And then I'm wondering if there is a quality of holiness to the vulnerability, a holiness of awareness, of a sense of, if I am vulnerable, then I can look at something more in attunement with my spiritual path or the direction that I want to move in my life. And I want to make it a holy experience and not an experience of fear. I'm just whirling around in my mind. I don't have any.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Mm.
To be vulnerable, we don't learn to be vulnerable. You can't learn to be vulnerable because we already are. It's a matter of getting the obstacles out of the way. And the obstacle is pretense.
Pretense.
Yeah. My dad came from South Italy, in Calabrese. They call them testadura, hardheads. He's a bit of an, I don't like to generalize, but he was quite a good example, a stereotype, really. For example, he would say that you should never apologize. It's a sign of weakness. I learned that from him, not because he said it, but because I saw him behave that way. But one day he actually said it out loud to me, and that was a trigger. And I thought, oh, that's a stupid thing to say. Then I realized I'm incorporating that. I was always getting into fights when I was a kid. I was always trying to prove myself, defend myself. It's this idea of I had to be someone. And what he was doing and what I started to learn was the macho male identity. Be tough, don't apologize, don't give in. It gives this impression of strength. He saw the alternative as weakness. And I hate to say it, but that's really not unusual. It's very common, especially among macho men and actually among men in general. Not that women are innocent, but it's very common among men. This idea you've got to be tough, you've got to show. And it's a show. It's like peacock feathers up. It's pretense. So you're trying to be something that you're not. You're pretending to be something. And at the same time, we want to maintain our own integrity and self-image. So I'm not just going to lie. I'm going to believe in what I'm saying. So now I'm doubling down and making that pretense even deeper. I'm making it even harder to be vulnerable because that means I'm exposing myself, and I can't do that. I have to put on this act so that everybody will respect me and take me seriously. But of course, it doesn't make them respect me and take me seriously. On the contrary, it makes me look weak. Why don't you apologize? You were wrong. What's wrong with you? This is the way I teach, and this is the way I think. I'm less concerned about where we should get or what we should be like, and I'm more concerned with why we're not. I'd like to be more compassionate, but sometimes I'm not. Why is that? What's the obstacle? What's getting in the way? What are the mental patterns? What are the attitudes? What are the fears? So it's by examining that we slowly start to let go of the pretense, and then what's left is how we actually are.
Part of vulnerability from a spiritual perspective is that you're giving yourself to surrendering to something greater than yourself. And that it requires some vulnerability for you to be able to let go. In order for you to have that chalice, it's like you're talking the Buddhist tradition, being a chalice of light, of harmony or peace, then it means that we have to make space for that process. And what we talked about self-doubt in part one was some of the things that occupy that space. When we're moving towards being more vulnerable, this means there must be a degree in which you feel secure in yourself.
That's the paradox, because the vulnerability that we're looking for takes courage. And vulnerabilities on the surface sounds like, well, that's a weakness. I'm admitting that I'm weak and vulnerable. So how is that courageous? It's supremely courageous in reality, but it doesn't appear that way. And that's what stops people. That's what stops us. It stops me sometimes. In that moment, it feels threatening. I put on the show instead. I tell my little white lie. But then within a few more seconds, I realize, oh, I just told a little white lie. I'm trying to defend something here. That self-awareness, you can't take it for granted. You can never take it for granted. We're always getting in our own way. And there's all sorts of good reasons for it. It can be well explained with psychology and neurology, accepting that I'm a meditator and I've been practicing this stuff for 50 years and I should have absolutely total concentration and control over my own mind. But I don't. It's hard to admit. And a lot of meditation and spiritual teachers feel the need to put on this show. Even if they're humble and they understand that they're not, they think they need to show some sort of solidity and transcendence. It's a natural instinct to put on this show, just as all the animals do when they confront each other. So we're dealing with a natural part of ourselves which we need to accept so that we can change it. Everything we learn in life, everything from our society, encourages us to put on a show.
It's as if we've been learning how to be not our true selves.
Exactly.
And
That's crazy, huh?
And we're not realizing we're living in an illusion of truly the essence of who we are, which is that substance of our life, our soul, in which I say in my vernacular. And somehow we've got these layers on ourselves, layers on layers and layers. And what we're really learning how to be is pull back those layers. They don't need to be there, and allow you to more be fully present and tied into something greater than yourself. And that is your learner. God, the I am presence, the Atman, the Buddhist patrician, you're learning through the flow of the universe and giving you understandings that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's where I think the value of being vulnerable. You're not going to go into a place filled with negativity and people that don't like you and try to be totally vulnerable to them. You ask your inner self, what do I need to say? What do I need to do here in order to move forward? You have to be saying the depth of who you are, because it doesn't call for that necessarily. So that's where that discernment or attunement is needed as you're integrating and walking a spiritual path and understanding yourself more and being more in that mindfulness of who you really are.
There's nothing wrong with putting on a show if you know you're putting on a show. It's when we think that that's who I am, or at least that's who I should be. And if that's who I should be, then I don't really think I am, but I have to believe in me. And it's just layer after layer of confusion. You can't make yourself. You already are.
That's the challenge, though, because I don't think most of these layers, people don't believe. What do you mean that's who I am? Well, who am I?
Exactly. We want an explanation in words. We want a definition. And that's not real. Who I am, I'm right here. Take a look. Yeah, what does that mean? This experience, how does it feel to breathe in and out? How does it feel to sit here? How does it feel to feel uncertain about yourself? This is the real me. I'm right here. Don't have to go anywhere else. I don't need any books. I don't need a teacher. I'm right here. But it's so much easier to look outside of ourselves for an answer. Go to the self-help section, get a book. Oh, there I am. Now I know what to do. It's all words. It's all ideas. And the ideas may be great, but that's not who we are. Who we are is somewhere else. And we have to come back to that again and again. Keep coming back to it. Love it. Accept it. Respect it. Be compassionate.
It takes practice. Sometimes we have people come into our lives to help us guide us and give us some pieces of information that we wouldn't have had otherwise, that enlightens us in some ways, that helps us on our spiritual path. And I think the life of Buddha, when you think of life, he had all these different things coming along that were some of illusion and some of us living in the world of samsara and knowing what is real and what isn't. Only when he started to go within and listen to the inner teacher teaching him about who he was, that he came out and had enlightenment. And I think we're all looking for how do we move from that being less defensive of the world and of our trappings of what the world has given to us, and being, because we moved into being more vulnerable, just being, sitting and observing. It didn't mean he didn't have all these other experiences, because he came for a world of affluence. And in that the wealth, he didn't necessarily have to even delve out into figuring out who am I and what I need to do here. It was the soul that allowed him to do that. There's something more. Just because I'm not suffering doesn't mean I can't understand or get awareness about what is the real meaning of life, what is the real purpose of living, of life. And I think he helped us to see that, because he didn't move from a defensiveness. He actually moved into being vulnerable and being open to experiencing different things, allowing him to grow to that greater attunement about who he truly was.
Yeah. He grew up in a very difficult time. This is not normally told in the story of Buddha. The story is told as a fable, where he met the sick man, the old man, and the dying man. He had these realizations that life was not as wonderful as he thought. He realized that every life is basically a tragedy in many ways. But he also believed. Why do I believe? Why do you believe? And other people don't. It's a really hard question to answer, because it's not about having good reasons. There's something instinctive in this. He believed that could change, and he gave up everything and he followed his nose. But there was a trigger. And one of the big triggers for him was the fact that his country, Sakya, was under an incredible threat from its neighbor, Kosala. And before the end of his lifetime, his country, Sakya, was wiped out. It was an act of genocide by the Kosala. And that threat had existed since before he was even born. So he grew up with that. He lived through that. And I think that's one of the things that triggered him, because we don't change because we think, oh, it might be a good idea to change. I'm going to transform myself. It's because something happens. Life kicks us in the face. And we take stock and we realize that, wow, I can't go on like this. I can't just pretend that I'm this person. It's getting me into trouble all the time. I lost my job. My marriage came to an end. My children don't speak to me. Those are the sort of events that trigger the sort of change of attitude that the Buddha was talking about, to stop going out and start coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We think of that as a primitive society where everyone was sitting around, like my man in India, sitting under the tree and doing nothing and just being. But no, these were busy people who came to the Buddha and said, my God, I'm stressed out of my mind. What can I do? So he was dealing with very much the same realities as we are. That's why Buddhism is still relevant.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of becoming vulnerable, before you can do that, you have to realize that you're trying to be invulnerable. We have to understand the ways in which we're afraid of being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And it's only when something hits us smack in the face and we fall flat down and we're in pain and we're suffering, that we realize something has to change. I have to do the work. Now I'm going to do it. That's the motivator. I don't think that's optional. I don't think anyone goes through life without getting smacked across the face.
Or I think some souls come in different levels. They come into the planet or into the human condition at different levels, and in which they're coming to help. Some souls are here. They're here to focus and help. Other souls are here to gain certain experiences that they need to learn to round themselves out. I think sometimes we all get stuck in the mud, and then we got to figure out how to get out of the mud that we find ourselves, regardless of the level of enlightenment of the soul coming into embodiment. What you're talking about, too, is defense mechanisms that we can have. We're trying to pull down those defense mechanisms or be aware of them and not allow them to rule us. And when we are able to break down that barrier or that wall or that fence that is there and realize it's a fence, it's a wall. It doesn't have to be there, and I can take it down, and I can be vulnerable and look at vulnerability as a strength. I think as a strength and an opportunity to learn and know that my soul and the essence of who I'm tied to will guide, direct, and aid me. And I think sometimes that's a missing element because people don't want to be vulnerable because they don't want to be alone. They don't want to be destitute. They don't want to feel as if there's nothing I can do here. And I'm saying, no, that's not the case at all. The vulnerability is an open door to understand a greater sense of who you truly are.
And there are many reasons we can come up with about why we shouldn't be vulnerable. It doesn't necessarily change anything. Reasoning is not enough. Because this act, the act that my father had, the act that I learned from him, it's a habit. It's not just something we work out in our head and make a decision to do it. When we decide it's wrong and we should change, just making a decision again is not enough to change it. It's a habit that we have to uproot. That's why it requires constant revisiting, keep going back. It requires trust in ourselves and our own ability to do it. It requires patience. Because sometimes we get it, and sometimes we forget again. Sometimes we fall back into it, just like I did the other night. So the self-compassion, again, all of these things come together in order to reach that point of vulnerability where we're still. It's about stillness. If we're really still, then we're naturally vulnerable because we're not busy trying to set up barriers and battlements.
Getting back to something you said earlier about thoughts and habit patterns that happen from those thoughts, I think what to add to that is the aspect of the feelings, the alchemy of our feelings that also tie into our thoughts, that tie into the behaviors that we engage in. Our feelings can be one of fear or vulnerability, or it can feel anxious. This creates a hesitancy for us to want to be vulnerable because we don't like it. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. It feels icky. And so it ends up, therefore, I don't want to go there. But what you're saying, and you said it earlier, it really takes a degree of courage, a coming of age of the heart, knowing that you are something more than this fear or doubt or these feelings. There's something greater that exists. And that's where I talk about the substance of your life. Your soul is what you're really trying to get in tune to and connected to. And the way in which you do that is stillness, which I am really in tune to, because I say that really is staying tuned to light and love.
Yeah.
And staying tuned to that allows you to move past some of these images. When you're in a desert and you have a mirage of images that come up because you're so thirsty, your images that come up for you, they're a ghost. And so you can let them go. You can let them flow by you. And knowing that I'm going to stay still, I'm in tune to light and love. And that brings harmony. It gives you the wisdom you need in your everyday life.
What you say about emotion is very important. We've all gone through school. One side of our brain has been trained and the other not so much, certainly not in school. It's a natural belief that ideas are what it's all about. If I think right, I'll be okay. But that ignores something. And I think this is where the Buddha really discovered something revolutionary. which is that we're not motivated by our thoughts. We're motivated by our emotions, and then we use our thoughts to justify it. This has been very well studied in recent years by neurologists and psychologists. We make decisions, and then we come up with a reason for them. So those decisions are made emotionally, which doesn't mean to say they're no good. Often they're the right decisions when we trust our emotions. But if we don't see that, and if we think that it's because of our head and not our heart, then another layer of confusion. We just have to clear away the confusion, and then everything's the way it should be. It's what they call the Buddha nature. That's the way we naturally are. Open, intelligent, caring, vulnerable. But we need a safe space to do that. We need support as well. And like that, I can tell you from experience, because I tried very hard to get away from people, to be completely isolated. I thought that the problem was people. When I finally found myself in this secure little place, I was way up the Swat Valley in North Pakistan in a tiny little village. I had this little room to myself, and I was finally alone and away from everybody. And I felt lonely. I couldn't believe it. I felt this need to connect to people. I couldn't believe it. I'd been working against it for years. My whole rationale, my whole way of thinking was all focused on the fact that I didn't need people. They were the problem. But I discovered that that was quite wrong. And it was emotion that led me there. And that's when I started to unravel all those negative, self-destructive patterns. And I began to open myself to other influences. And it was within a few weeks of that I first encountered the Tibetans, and I soon became a monk. That's when everything started to turn around.
So it's interesting that you were saying that once you got on the top of that mountain and was by yourself, it felt very lonely. And I think each soul has certain lessons and missions that they're here to do. So your soul may have said, this is not right. We need more connection, because we need for you to teach or help instruct other ways of being on planet Earth. So this doesn't, you can do this for a little bit, but you can't do it for like your entire life. No way.
Not in a healthy way, no. No.
Exactly. As we're talking about this less defensiveness to moving into allowing you to be more vulnerable, how would you summarize that for the listeners who are thinking about this for themselves as we're doing this deep dive into this topic area? How would you summarize it?
The first thing to look for and identify in ourselves is defensiveness. That's where it begins. When we feel defensive, we put on an act. And the act covers up who we are. And we want to see the next layer, which is us trying to believe in our act, trying to be whole and trying to be honest, really trying to be truthful and believe the act I'm putting on as if it's me. When we see those layers of confusion, and underneath that, there is a sense of fear. Just sit with that and admit that I'm afraid. Now, I just said the words, and I still cringe as if someone raised to be a macho man. To say I'm afraid, it really goes against the grain. Even now, after all these years. So I have to recognize that and see that, well, that still has power. That attitude that I learned from my dad, it still has power in me. And I have to accept that and acknowledge that and continue working on it. And then once we identify that, once we have the support and the energy that we need to pursue that as a path, then vulnerability comes naturally. It's not about trying to become vulnerable, it's about letting go of invulnerability.
I wonder if there's a figure eight flow that flows between vulnerability and being invulnerable. And at the sweet spot, in the middle of that figure eight flow, is what we're learning how our balance point is for each one, which may be a little bit uniquely different, but it's still that point that allows us to stay centered, because I think we live in a world in which we're always flip-flopping. We flop this way, we flop that way. And what life is saying, like the seesaw is another analogy, is just stay in the center. You're not going to go down too far or too high, but you're going to stay centered right there and figure out what that sweet spot is for yourself that allows you to tap into something greater and more expansive than yourself and with your soul and mind.
Yeah, I would put that another way. I would say it's about having a healthy ego. We need an ego to interact with people, but it can get out of hand, as we all know. But we can't dispense with it. A lot of beginning Buddhists learn about anatta, which means no self, and they think, oh, there is no ego. The ego doesn't exist. I can dispense with that. It doesn't work quite like that. It takes a practice to realize that, yes, there's something here which I need to cultivate, which is the face I show to the world, which is a construct. As long as it's based on who I actually am, and that requires me knowing, or at least having some idea of who I actually am, and not getting completely bamboozled by my own self-image. It's tricky. We're so bloody clever. Sorry for the bad language. But
my father used to say, that's the great work.
Exactly. Sometimes we're too clever for our own good.
If you were to leave them with a phrase or a statement that allows them something to have as a nugget to munch on or to think more about for themselves, what might that be?
A lot of people, and it's very common today to hear people say, just be yourself. And that's all. Just be yourself. Of course, I must be. But that's the real question. The effort is, forget about trying to be yourself. Look at the way in which you're not yourself. Focus on that. Everything else will fall into place.
I know we're moving to our closure here, but I think sometimes people don't want is being observant of oneself, because you have to be a student of oneself in order to know how you show up and how you are. Because I think there's a lot of opaqueness that people have about their trueness of who they really are. And that takes stillness, as you talked about, and it takes patience and a courageousness that allows you to be able to do that. So any comment to that, and then we'll wind down.
Yeah, I'd like to wind up with a phrase that the Buddha used often, which is that he described us as deluded, giving into illusions. And the idea is that when you practice Dharma, you let go of these illusions, and the result of that is that you're enlightened at the end. And it all sounds very sweet and very lovely, but when you think about it, to give up my illusions means to become disillusioned. And that's exactly how it feels sometimes. Sometimes we find something about ourselves which we have to let go of, which we don't want to let go of, which hurts. And we have to change our way of thinking and the way we relate to people because of those changes. And so when we talk about courage, it's not just the courage to move forward, it's also the courage to sit with our pain, because that's where the lessons are. Mm-hmm. That's where the biggest lessons are.
Mm-hmm. So that's nicely stated. And I think from a spiritual nature and a soul nature is that there is guidance, there is direction given to us in the silence of our stillness to strengthen ourselves, to look at things that may not serve us well and that we know we need to let go of, and how to be able to do that. I think there's an inner wisdom for those who sit with themselves, that they start getting aha moments that allow them to say, okay, I need no longer to hold on to that. One more comment.
In order to sit with the stillness and be alone, we also need support, because it's counterintuitive to do that. If we don't know other people who are doing that, we come back to self-doubt again. Or am I wasting my time? I'm just navel gazing. No, we need the reinforcement of knowing that other people do this, that we know them, that they're sensible, intelligent people, that they're making progress too. That support is essential. Mm-hmm. But also the ability to sit quietly with yourself. So it's both.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think a community of like-minded people is very powerful to have around you, because we don't always see aspects of ourselves that others can see as we're learning ourselves. So it's a community of individuals that can support and help us. If they want to get in contact with you,
then go to my website. I'm theinnermonk.com, also skettini.com. That gives you a little background on me and my story, but also on Mindfulness Live, which is my 3 times a week meditation training, designed to be a support system. 3 half hours a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You get to meet other people, meditate a little bit, guided meditation, and also a discourse, thoughts to carry through your day to bring you up to that level of interaction with yourself. You're constantly looking at yourself and you're constantly growing.
and that's what it's all about, to continue to grow, evolve, to be your best self. Thank you, Stephen, so much for this conversation. I would invite the listeners to look back on the last episode we had, which really focused on self-doubt. We think this will be helpful to you as you're on your spiritual journey. Thank you. We wish you the best as you move forward in your lives, and come back again and listen to another episode.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.